I went to that ATM on a quiet weekday night expecting nothing more than a boring errand to close out an already draining day. The kind where your body is tired, but your mind is still buzzing with unfinished thoughts, unpaid bills, and the added irritation of knowing you're stopping somewhere you don't want to be simply because life refuses to fully modernize around people who still demand cash for rent. The strip mall was dimly lit and half asleep when I arrived, with flickering fluorescent lights humming above cracked pavement, empty storefronts reflecting tired neon signs in their dark windows, and only a handful of cars scattered around the lot in that uneven way that suggests everyone there just wants to leave as soon as possible. I noticed the ATM line immediately, not long but slow. The kind of line that doesn't look dangerous until you realize each person ahead of you is treating the machine like it owes them something personal, and I settled in behind them with a patient sigh, scrolling aimlessly on my phone while the battery warning hovered like an unspoken threat. The first person ahead of me was a teenager repeatedly inserting and removing his card, as if the machine might suddenly change its mind. The second was a man obsessively recounting his cash under the harsh white light, and the third was an older woman angrily jabbing at the screen while muttering complaints that bounced off the glass enclosure. By the time it was my turn, the air around the ATM felt thick with collective irritation, the unspoken resentment of strangers who believe their time is more valuable than anyone else's. And I stepped inside the glass booth with a quiet sense of urgency, already aware that eyes were on me before the door even clicked shut. The machine greeted me slowly, painfully slowly, each screen transition lagging just long enough to feel deliberate. And the moment I entered my PIN and watched the screen freeze completely, I felt that familiar tightening in my chest that comes when technology decides today is the day it will test your patience. When the error message appeared and forced me to cancel, then repeat the process, I could already sense movement behind the glass, shadows shifting, bodies leaning forward, people mentally counting seconds as if they were being stolen from them one by one. On my second attempt, the machine stalled again, this time longer, the screen dimming and brightening like it was struggling to stay awake. And that was when the first loud, theatrical sigh sliced through the quiet plaza, sharp enough to carry even through the glass. I glanced back and saw her immediately, standing near the front of the line with perfectly styled hair, an expensive coat, and a posture that communicated entitlement before she even opened her mouth, her foot tapping aggressively against the tile like a ticking clock set to explode. She didn't speak to me directly at first, choosing instead to project her frustration outward, loudly commenting about people who take forever as if I weren't standing a few feet away, trapped inside a malfunctioning machine with no fast escape. I raised a hand apologetically through the glass and tried to keep my tone calm. When I explained the ATM was slow, fully expecting that to be enough for a reasonable person, yet the look on her face told me reason was never part of her plan. She snapped back that I'd been in there too long already, that this wasn't my personal bank, and that some people had real lives to get back to. The words dripping with a condescension that immediately shifted the situation from inconvenient to hostile. I turned back to the machine rather than argue, focusing on the glowing screen as it crawled forward at its own cruel pace, while behind me I could hear murmurs and subtle movements that made the booth feel smaller by the second. That was when she crossed the line completely, muttering loud enough for everyone to hear that I was probably doing something shady, that normal people didn't take this long, and that the situation didn't feel right to her, as if suspicion were a reasonable response to a slow ATM. I turned around fully, meeting her stare, feeling a mix of disbelief and frustration surge through me as I calmly explained that I was withdrawing cash like everyone else, while the people behind her avoided eye contact, unwilling to intervene, but eager to watch. She folded her arms and suggested I step aside and let someone else go, ignoring the obvious fact that abandoning a half-processed transaction would only make things worse, yet acting as though my refusal proved her point. Just as the tension reached its peak, the ATM finally whirred to life, the mechanical sound of bills being counted filling the booth like a release of pressure, and I grabbed the cash, with visible relief, eager to end the interaction before it escalated further. As I opened the door to leave, expecting to step past her and disappear into the parking lot, she deliberately stepped forward and blocked my path, her phone already in her hand, her face set with the satisfaction of someone about to feel powerful. She announced she was calling the police because my behavior was suspicious, and because she didn't feel safe, using that word with practiced confidence, knowing exactly how heavy it would land in a public space. I tried to reason with her, explaining that the transaction was complete and that she could use the ATM now, but she ignored me entirely, speaking loudly into her phone as if narrating a crime documentary where she was the hero. She described me to the dispatcher in unnecessary detail, exaggerating my actions, labeling normal frustration as nervousness, and painting an image that didn't match reality but felt dangerous, simply because it was being said out loud. Feeling exposed and humiliated, I stepped away from the booth and toward my car, hoping physical distance would end the spectacle, yet she followed, continuing her narration as people in the plaza openly stared. I stopped near my car and told her firmly that I wasn't nervous, that I was frustrated, only to watch her smirk as though my response confirmed everything she wanted to believe. The arrival of the police car transformed the atmosphere instantly. Flashing lights reflecting off glass and metal, conversations dying mid-sentence, and the entire plaza shifting into silent observation mode. Two officers stepped out, one approaching her as she launched into her version of events, the other walking toward me with a neutral expression that did little to calm my racing thoughts. I kept my hands visible and explained everything clearly, from the malfunctioning ATM to her accusations, handing over my receipt as undeniable proof of a perfectly ordinary transaction. The officer listened carefully, nodding as I spoke, while the other officer's polite patience slowly wore thin as her story became more dramatic with every retelling. After a brief, quiet conversation between the officers, one of them turned to me and told me I was free to go, stating plainly that there was no evidence of wrongdoing and no reason for further action. He then addressed her and explained that using an ATM for an extended period was not illegal, that no tampering had occurred, and that misusing emergency services could have consequences. Her confident posture collapsed into visible embarrassment, her face flushing as the power she tried to wield evaporated in front of witnesses who had seen everything unfold. I got into my car and drove home slowly, my hands still tense on the steering wheel, replaying the entire incident in my mind as the quiet street stretched ahead of me. Even after locking my door and sitting alone in my apartment, the weight of the experience lingered, not because of fear, but because of how easily patience had turned into suspicion, and inconvenience into accusation. That night taught me how quickly ordinary moments can spiral when entitlement replaces empathy, and how something as simple as taking the long at an ATM can reveal far more about people than any crime ever could.